Hello, and welcome to the first live broadcast for Hillbilly Cat History, where we're going to cover the mystery of August 16th, 1977, which is new evidence and old lies. This is my first broadcast, so it's taken me just a couple of minutes to figure everything out. Nobody's here yet, so that's okay. And it'll give me a couple of minutes to figure out exactly how to do this. Looks like I'm going to have to go in a different way. Okay, I think I'm almost there. Just a couple of more things to set up. Didn't know it was going to be quite this complicated. Just to set up. Didn't know it was going to be this. Hello. Okay. I think we're ready to go. Let's test out one last thing, and then I will be totally ready. Oh, one more piece. Well, hello, Nancy. Happy 4th of July. I think we've got everything working, and we're just about to start. You are the very first viewer. Welcome. What we're going to do today is we're going to cover the mystery of August 16th, 1977, new evidence and old lies. And basically, we're going to put ourselves in the position of Elvis fan who was there in Memphis on August 16th, 1977, and how they would have learned about the terrible news that Elvis had passed away and what they decided to do about it, and how they followed the story and how they tried to find the truth. So I hope that sounds exciting to everybody. Let's take a look. Oops, can't do that. So this is going to take me just a minute as I figure out how to run everything here. A lot of behind the scenes stuff, but I tried to set this up so that it's going to be, kind of amazing, I hope, once I actually get everything running right. But here we can, we're going to meet Joyce. And Joyce is our avatar, our fictional character, the Elvis fan who's in Memphis on August 16th, 1977. It's her eyes that we're going to see through, but really, it's our eyes that are seeing, that Joyce is going to reflect. She's going to have the same kind of questions that a lot of us still have today. She's going to have the same kind of thoughts that a lot of us still have today about what happened back then. She's going to be trying to solve those same kind of mysteries. And the voice of the chatters in this video, in this series of live streams, is going to inform what Joyce thinks and what she does and how she approaches the situation. And it all starts on August 16th, 1977, right about 4:30 in the afternoon in Memphis. The very first thing that happens is Joyce gets a phone call. And her friend is on the phone, and her friend is another Elvis fan, and she asked Joyce, has she heard the news? And of course, Joyce hasn't. So her friend just breaks down and has to hang up, and but tells Joyce that maybe she should turn on the radio. And Joyce flips that radio on, and she catches the very tail end of a broadcast that is indicating someone's passed away, and they start to play Elvis Presley songs, and she knows that this is Elvis. So she begins to break down too, but then she starts to think that what's happened here. Elvis was only 42 years old, so he shouldn't have passed away at this point. People don't just fall over dead at 42, not in most people's experience. So this is very odd situation. She knows from her prior experience watching the news and, just from having seen other celebrities go through things that there's going to be a lot come out about this. And she's going to have to judge what's true and what's not true. And she decides that she's going to treat this like a cold case homicide case. So she's going to be able to see only the evidence that comes out to the public, right? She's not going to be able to do interviews directly with people. She's not going to be able to get any inside information because she just doesn't have those kind of links. She's just going to have the information that was available to everybody in 1977. And that's going to come from the radios, the televisions, the newspapers. And she's going to try to decide well, thank you, Nancy. I really appreciate that. I'm not doing a great job getting it out there yet, but hopefully I'm going to get a lot smoother as we go through this. But we're going to listen to radio broadcasts. We're going to watch television broadcasts. We're going to look at exactly what the newspaper said, and we're going to figure out what would you have known on these days? How would you have compared that? How's Joyce going to compare that to what she's already got? The knowledge she's already picked up, and how does that jive together? Are we hearing the truth from everyone? Are their stories changing over time? Do the stories seem to change for particular reasons? As we get further and further away from the actual event, we'll see books that get published. We'll see later TV interviews and things done to support those books. So I think this is going to be really interesting, and it's going to help us sort truth from fiction. And it's also going to show, where did these rumors, if there are rumors, where did they start? So let me move on to the next piece here before I get lost. We're just going to think about what Joyce would do, So Joyce is actually going to start a notebook. And she's going to... her notebook's not going to be digital like our notebook. She's just going to use a pen and paper. But we're going to look at what would she write in that notebook? And so the very first thing is she's going to look at questions that she has, and we're going to list those as categories, but these are really questions. And Joyce decides she's going to approach this, hopefully like a detective or a journalist, the best kind of journalist. And she's going to ask those questions that hopefully we all learned in school about journalism, which is who, what, when, why, where, and how, the big questions. But we're also going to make a distinction on who, because we kind of know who. So we can go ahead and put that in here. It's Elvis Presley. We'll just make this big enough to make him in there. Because that's who this has happened to, obviously. But people are going to have firsthand information, and people are going to have no firsthand information. This would be second, third, fourth hand information, something that's come to them from somebody else. We're going to distinguish who these people are. Now, like a firsthand person, that's going to be basically anyone that was at Graceland, anyone that was there the day that, and we have to determine a time period that we're going to look at. And we're basically going to look at the 24 hours before Elvis passed away. But for logistical purposes, that's really 12:01 a.m. on May 15th, going through, roughly 4:30, 4 o'clock p.m. on August 16th, which we're going to find is a significant time, that 4 p.m. Now, who had no firsthand knowledge? Well, this is everybody that wasn't at Graceland, but they might have a name that's connected very close to Elvis, and they might have opinions about what happened to Elvis, but they don't know what actually happened because they weren't there. So whatever information they're gathering is hopefully from someone who was there, or it's an opinion that they have. Therefore, this is really not firsthand information. May still deserve weight. We may still need to look at it. And of course, we want to look at it. But then what? Well, what happened right now, all that Joyce knows, because all she's heard is that Elvis has passed away. She doesn't actually know where it's happened, doesn't actually know what happened. Has he been murdered? Did he die of natural causes? That seems odd for a 42-year-old man. Was he in a car accident? Did someone poison him? Like, who knows what happened? We don't yet, because Joyce doesn't know. When did it happen? Joyce doesn't know. She just knows that it happened today. That's all she knows. Because if it had happened yesterday, she would have heard about it yesterday. Where did it happen? Joyce doesn't know. Why did it happen? This is a tough question. Almost nobody is going to be able to answer that. But if there was foul play involved, maybe there's a why. And how did it happen? What exactly happened? Because, of course, Joyce doesn't know that. So all of these questions are still out there. She's going to want to know them all. Let's take a look at how Joyce is going to find this information. And while I'm doing that, hi, Lorna. I saw that you just came in. So I won't always be able to see the chats that are coming in. So if I miss you, just hang on. I'm going to come back to the chats. I'm going to try to get everybody. And of course, there's like 2 people in here right now, so that are chatting. So hello. Very good to see you. I'm glad you joined us for this. But what we're going to look at this second is how did information become public in 1977? How would Joyce, somebody's called Joyce and said that Elvis is gone. She's turned on the radio and she's heard the radio say something that she believes is Elvis is gone. So how did the radio and her friend get this information? Well, it probably came, we can see the, oops. I did not know that would happen if I hit that button, but hang on just a second. But we can see on this page that there is a wire. Okay, and the wire was the Associated Press or the United Press International. And these were groups, there were a couple others, but these were groups that they would gather news. They didn't really have their own news reporters. They had like independent reporters that were out there, and they would file stories with the Associated Press, the United Press International, and then those organizations would broadcast those out to whoever contracted with them to receive that information, which would be different radio stations, television stations, and newspapers. And the way this worked was there was a machine, and it was called like a teletype. And I meant to grab a picture of that, but I'll grab one for the next time we talk that you guys will be able to see that. But it's a teletype machine. It looked like a giant metal box that one side flipped down and had a typewriter, and you would file your stories by basically typing them into the machine. The story would go across the wire, and that's why it's called a wire. So it's like a telegraph kind of thing. But it would go across the wire to like a main headquarters, and then that headquarters would evaluate the story and determine whether they were going to pass it on. So there was like I guess they would call it a fact check today. They would fact check it to the best of their ability in a short period of time, because this was immediate news, and then they would pop it back out there. So what this meant was a station like your local radio station would be able to subscribe to this service. They would get a printout. So again, it was just like a typewriter or one of the old dot matrix printers you may remember from way back in the 80s, but it would manually print out a sheet that was typewritten that would have this news on it, and then they would give it to the guy that was basically the DJ on the local radio station, and he would read that off as the news. So that was the wire step, and then it would go up to like the local radio, and then the national radio would also get the same wire, but they would probably go through their own fact check because they had a little more reputation on the line. Because we're looking at like one of the big three: ABC, CBS, NBC. There were only 3 television broadcasting networks back then, and they grew out of radio stations. They were massive corporations, and people trusted them, so they had a reputation to uphold. So they wouldn't just pop out whatever the Associated Press or United Press International would say. They would give it a little bit of fact checking of their own, a little scrutiny, and then they would publish it, basically by reading it on air. The local TV news, it was probably a little more fact checking than the local radio. Took a little longer to actually set up a news broadcast, a television news broadcast. It was rare that you'd break into a normal broadcasting day. So you were probably going to do the news during the regular times. So you'd have a little more time to check everything. And people tended to trust the TV news a little more than the radio news. National TV news, again, it's connected back to those same networks, ABC, CBS, NBC, who are also associated with the local TV news, because everybody's an affiliate to somebody. So we can see here that WHBQ was an affiliate to ABC. That means they were getting news from ABC to put onto their local TV news, and they were sending local news to national ABC to see if they wanted to broadcast any of that. And then we hit the local newspapers. Now, papers take the most time to get the news out because somebody has to put all that typeset in place and actually print the papers. You have to write the stories. There's a lot of work that goes into that. So that's going to get the most fact checking. It's got the most time involved. It's the slowest to kind of get the news out there, but people are going to trust it the most because it's in print. You can refer back to it. It doesn't just disappear like a television or a radio broadcast. And then we get up into the national newspapers, which are like the New York Times. And of course, that's kind of the top of the chain. Now, all of these pieces are feeding back into the wires. They're all sending news to the wire, and then the wire's sending this news out to all of them. So this is the information loop that Nancy's going to deal with as she moves through her, her investigation of what's going on. So Nancy, first thing she's going to do, I'm just taking a look through the chats here real quick to make sure I'm not missing anything. Okay, so but the first thing that Joyce is going to do is, let me just pull up my right screen here. She's going to listen to the radio, because that's where the first news is really going to hit, and that's where the news is right now. It's probably about 4:45 p.m., and she's just trying to hear what's going on. So let's see if I believe I have everything set right that you guys will be able to hear that. If you can let me know in the chat if you hear this. Well, I got to get it started. Here we go.
Repeating a news bulletin we had earlier, police in Memphis, Tennessee say this afternoon 42-year-old Elvis Presley, the Mississippi boy whose country rock guitar and gyrating hips launched a new style of popular music, died this afternoon at Baptist Hospital. Presley was 42. He had been taken to the emergency room of the hospital, suffering from what officials said was respiratory distress. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, dead at 42 this afternoon in Memphis. Back to regular programming.
All right. Thank you, Nancy. I'm glad to hear that you guys can hear that. So what did we learn from this clip? This very first clip that Joyce listened to is that Elvis died this afternoon, and he went to Baptist Hospital. And there's probably a couple other things in there, but she probably missed them, kind of like I did while I was trying to listen to the rest of while I was trying to monitor the rest of this broadcast. So so we get to hear, we get to kind of experience the way that that Joyce experienced this. But let's go ahead and listen to this one more time.
Repeating a news bulletin we had earlier, police in Memphis, Tennessee say this afternoon 42-year-old Elvis Presley, the Mississippi boy whose country rock guitar and gyrating hips launched a new style of popular music, died this afternoon at Baptist Hospital. Presley was 42. He had been taken to the emergency room of the hospital, suffering from what officials said was respiratory distress. Elvis Presley.
So what we're hearing is respiratory distress at Baptist Hospital. So let's go over to Joyce's notes, and here is where Joyce is going to actually keep her notes, and so that she can keep everything straight. And so that very first one was, I believe, WEPG Radio was the publication. That's where it was broadcast from. And that source was really left open. So we're going to kind of assume that that was a wire, but we don't know which wire. And the factual claim is that Elvis Presley was taken to Baptist Hospital in respiratory distress. But I'm not spelling that right. But it's not going to tell me how to spell it. No, but that's okay. People misspell stuff in their notes, and I'll fix it in a minute. Okay. So this just gives us an idea about how she's going to keep track of all this. And I'm not necessarily going to fill this all in as we go through on air, but I will be filling this in, and I will eventually make this document that everyone can have, that you'll be able to download it for free once we get some, a decent amount of data in here. And then this will give us the ability to, because I'm building it as a data table, we'll be able to sort by all of these different headings. So we'll be able to see by exact date when something was said and everything that was said on that date. We'll be able to see who said something, and how many other things that they've said, what days they said it on. We can line it all up, and then we'll be able to see whether their factual claims have changed over time. We'll also be able to see who published that, so if somebody's publishing everything through the same source, maybe there's something suspect about that. We'll be able to look at the claim. And if the same claim is being said by the same source and no one else is repeating it, maybe that's something that we need to look at a little bit more. So that's just a little bit of what we're going to be doing during this series. Let's go ahead and listen to another radio broadcast. Pull it up here.
Now stand by for a CBS report on the death of Elvis Presley.
CBS News. That sound characterized the decade, the rocking and rolling 50s. Today, the man whose name became synonymous with a new sound, Elvis Presley, died at the age of 42. I'm Stephanie Shelton, reporting on the CBS Radio Network, and we have a report on Presley's death from Dan Osborne of station WREC.
Elvis Presley, the Mississippi boy whose country rock guitar and gyrating hits turned the music industry inside out in the mid-1950s, died this afternoon in his adopted hometown, Memphis. The popular singer apparently collapsed at his home in South Memphis and was transported to Baptist Hospital by fire department ambulance. No cause of death has been announced, but a hospital spokesman earlier said Presley had suffered respiratory distress. A later report, confirmed through the local civil defense office, revealed that Presley was dead on arrival. Presley, known as the King of Rock, had many fans here in his hometown. Most of them at this point expressed shock and even disbelief. But there's no doubt the city has lost one of its all-time favorite sons. This is Dan Osborne for CBS News, Memphis.
So we learned a couple of different things in this one. And one was that they're saying that he arrived and he'd already passed away by the time he arrived at the hospital, which is not what we've heard yet. And then we also heard that he collapsed at his home at Graceland. So I don't believe we'd heard that yet either. So now Joyce knows that he's passed away at his home. So let's take a moment to familiarize ourselves with Graceland. Joyce, living in Memphis, she's probably been out to Graceland several times, being an Elvis fan. She's walked around it. She's, from the outside, seeing what she can see. We're going to get a slightly better view than what she would be able to get. And here we center in on Graceland. Let me pause this for a moment. You can see up at right in the middle. Let's take a look at the middle. That's where the actual house is. And you can see the roof structure. You can see the front entrance, and it goes into the curved driveway towards the front. And there's probably a lot more buildings than you realized were probably here. Over at the right, you can see where towards the top, you can see where the pool is. That's a good question, Nancy, whether the people that were standing outside the gate that day, whether they had any idea what was going on. They didn't at the moment. They did see an ambulance go in and out, and we're going to see some reports of that. But they didn't really have any idea what was going on. It didn't become clear until these radio broadcasts that we've been listening to started coming out, and that's when the massive reaction started. People didn't believe these radio broadcasts at first. Then they had to accept them as fact, and that's when people started to arrive at Graceland. They started to swarm to the record stores and buy the records. Absolutely, Dom. Does the stream present evidence of whether or not Elvis died? The stream series absolutely is. This is the first episode. Of course, there's tons and tons of evidence to go through, and it's going to be kind of a slow jog, but we're going to actually get there, and we're gonna look at everything, because that's what Joyce would have done at the time, right? She would have bought up everything that she could have got her hands on, and that included every theory that came out, whether it was correct or not. So just to go back to, hopefully you guys can see Graceland on screen right now. You can see the pool and the meditation garden there at the very top. That building that is connected by a walkway to the pool, that's the tennis or the racquetball courts. So this just gives you an idea of what the layout of Graceland is. You know, everything towards the bottom of the screen and then towards the left, you know, there's another driveway there and it goes out towards the back. That's all the offices and stuff. And so that's the back way out of Graceland. So you guys have probably heard about that second way out. That's the famous second way out where they would park a lot of cars back in that area. So this just kind of orients us on where this happened. So we'll just play out the rest of this video so you guys can see, in case you've never been to Graceland. And of course, we're seeing some parts of it here that you don't get to see on the tour, where all the Graceland executives work. And then that big circle asphalt at the front, that's the driveway. And then that leads out to the gates. So Nancy, I think you're right. There are a lot of questions. And Joyce hasn't even formulated all of them yet. And we're going to formulate those lists, and we're going to keep bringing those questions up until we get answers. You know, Joyce is going to keep tracking it down until she gets an answer that she's happy with. And that might go all the way to 2025, which I think it probably will. We're going to look at a lot of evidence as we keep going. So let's go ahead and listen to another CBS News report.
The undisputed king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley, is dead. He died this afternoon here in his adopted hometown of Memphis after apparently collapsing at his South Memphis mansion. He was transported by ambulance to Baptist Hospital, where he was pronounced dead on arrival. No cause of death has been given yet, but an early report from the hospital vice president indicates Presley was suffering from respiratory distress. Presley had been a frequent patient at Baptist Hospital during the last 2 years. It was rumored that he was suffering from various incurable diseases, but his doctors blamed the frequent hospitalizations on eye trouble, a twisted colon, and exhaustion. Earlier this year, he canceled performances in Louisiana and returned here to Memphis and was hospitalized with exhaustion. The local Chamber of Commerce is calling on the mayor and the city council to declare a day of mourning in memory of Elvis, and the mayor has ordered all flags in the city to be flown at half-staff. This is Dan Osborne for CBS News, Memphis.
Presley's show business friends, as well as his legions of fans, are mourning tonight. Sammy Davis Jr. was asked how the performer would rate on a scale of 1 to 10.
Well, he's got to be 11, babe. And I'm not saying that because of the tragedy of the moment, but because anybody in this business of ours that can become one of a kind, he's the one, the only, the original. Everybody else is an imitator that came after him.
Sammy Davis Jr. Funeral arrangements for Elvis Presley are not yet complete.
CBS News. Elvis Presley, the one-time king of popular music, is dead at the age of 42. This is Doug Poling reporting on the CBS radio network. Presley was stricken this afternoon at his mansion in Memphis, Tennessee, and rushed to Baptist Hospital. Memphis Police Director E. Winslow Chapman says a doctor was with him.
Mr. Presley's personal physician, Dr. Nicopoulos, was the one that called for the ambulance. He was the one that was with him when the ambulance arrived, and he is the doctor that pronounced him dead at Baptist Hospital.
Hospital officials said Presley was suffering from respiratory distress. His doctor says he may have suffered a heart attack. He had been hospitalized recently for several conditions, including eye trouble and exhaustion.
So that was interesting because we learned like a lot of stuff, and we got to hear from Sammy Davis Jr. But in that one, we heard something about a colon. So if you have followed this story for up through 2025, and you've read like Dr. Nick's book, or seen interviews about that, or any of the more recent books that focus on its medical stuff, the colon plays a large role. But here we are on that day, and somebody's mentioning that he did have an issue with the colon. I just find that interesting, because that didn't seem to come into the discussions about this until a much later time in books and stuff like that. All right. Let's take a look at the Memphis TV schedule. Obviously, you're going to move on from listening to the radio, and you're going to want to try to get a newspaper. But by the point that this happened in the day, it was too late for the newspapers to get anything into print about this. It was simply just not logistically possible. Too late for an extra, too late for anything like that. So you were then going to look to the TV as your next source, and it's going to start shooting out news with the regular broadcast that it has every day scheduled. So in Memphis, there was Channel 3, WREG, which was the CBS affiliate, and this just shows that their schedule was for the day. At 6 a.m. they had a broadcast, so Joyce knows that tomorrow she can start getting more news at 6 a.m. And then at 7, there's going to be a Good Morning from Memphis, which is a local Memphis station. And the hope here is that because this happened in Memphis, the Memphis stations are going to do a little more than what the others would do. It's the hometown thing. They got people on the ground, and there are newspapers in Memphis. And back in 1977, newspapers were a big deal, and they wanted to go out there and get stories that nobody else had. So it's more like what you think of when you think of Superman and Clark Kent and Lois Lane. It was that kind of journalism, and people were going to go out there and find this story. Hi, Emma. It's great to see you here in the live. Thank you for joining. Right, Nancy, right. Okay, so we're going to take a look at some different broadcasts that happened here with CBS. Let me see. I think... Oh, it's not going to let me... So I reload this.
More than 20,000 persons. People he knew well, people he had never even met. The thousands of mourning Presley fans who had converged on Memphis came from all over the nation. Most of them were not wealthy, and so they had to drive for long hours over hundreds of miles, some in battered autos. They packed up the kids and the family dog, even left their jobs to be here. One family from Indiana, living off Social Security, spent $300 on the trip. The cost didn't seem to matter. They were all drawn to Presley in death as they had been drawn to him in life.
I think it was the greatest. That's my thing. There'll never be another one like him. To me, he'll live in the hearts of people forever.
It took us about 16 hours. Didn't miss it. Can't believe the people here. Other than that, rock and roll never forgets.
And how do you feel?
Awful. Like something died. A part of me died.
Why a part of you?
Because ever since I was 11, I loved his music, I loved him, and just part of you's gone when he's gone.
Of course, we're celebrating the 4th.
So that was interesting. People were spending everything they had to be able to get down to Memphis to try to pay their respects to Elvis after he passed away. People on Social Security, $300. I mean, that's crazy, right? So that's the effect that this news was having on people, although we didn't really learn much about what actually happened. In Memphis, they've also got Channel 5, WMC, which was the NBC affiliate. And at 7 a.m., they're going to have a show. And then at 12, they have Action News 5, which is a local show. So again, hopefully it'll have local news. And then at 5 p.m., which is right at the time we're at about on August 16th, it's about 5 p.m., Joyce is looking for this news. Action News 5 is going to be on. So she's going to be able to grab a broadcast there and then see 6 p.m. NBC Nightly News, and then probably be able to see a replay, possibly some new news at 10 o'clock with the Action News. So let's take a look at one of these broadcasts.
Warning, I upload this.
All right, let me see if I can get to the part that we want to see here. All right, this is the national broadcast, and it has David Brinkley, who was a famous TV anchor. People really trusted David back in the day. So let's see what David has to say.
Good evening. It didn't even matter a great deal whether you liked Elvis or not. He changed our lives. So were a lot of other people, parts of our lives, but they didn't change things. Manavani played Charmaine 1,000 times, and we heard it on the radio in elevators.
What is that?
And dentists' offices, but it didn't change anything. Elvis Presley did. He changed the way then teenaged America thought about things, about public entertainers and pop music and popular attitudes toward living and behaving and dressing and talking. And so when he died today of some kind of
Well, it's giving me some trouble pulling this one through. I don't know if I've hit the limit of my internet or... Let's try again.
heart ailment at the age of 42, people felt a sense of loss whether they ever liked his singing or not, particularly in Memphis, where he lived. Jackson Bain is in Memphis.
He played in the bedroom of mentioned this afternoon. He was room by road manager Joe Esposito. After Esposito's attempts to revive Presley failed, he called the Memphis Fire Department ambulance service. The ambulance rushed the 42-year-old singer here at the hospital in the mansion, and Presley was pronounced dead on arrival. An autopsy was held tonight, and late this evening, Shelby County
All right, this is giving me a lot of trouble with this one. I'm not sure why. Let's go back to my main screen here. Let me check another. Yeah, it's telling me that it's having trouble getting enough data through to stop from buffering. So, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to end this live stream, and I'm going to work on these issues in the background and see if I can't get this to work better for another one. But if you guys were interested in this and you like this, I hope you leave some comments below, or let some other people know that I'm going to be doing these live streams. I might actually just redo this first one because I don't really know what I'm doing live streaming yet. And I thought that this would be able to do this so that we could play this, but if it isn't going to work this way, I think I have some workarounds that will work. And we're at about 45 minutes. So I think we're at a pretty good length for, I'm normally going to keep these at about an hour anyway. But if you guys have some questions that you'd like to ask me right now, I'd be happy to have a little bit of a chat and talk before I go. Let me see if I find something that's more interesting for us to look at on here. And that's kind of like what's going to come up. We're going to watch some more of these videos. Oh, I do have one other interesting thing. Let's see if this will play so that we can at least watch it. This is a video that shows, well, it looks like it's going to give us problems too. Yeah, it's not going to play out right. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and end this because it is still giving me all kinds of error codes. So we will stop the streaming. I will see you guys again later. I really appreciate all of you that support my channel, and keep on taking care of business, everybody. Hillbilly Cat History out.